Hi and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing British Airways' business class product, Club World, on board the Airbus A380 on one of the longest routes on the British Airways network, from London Heathrow Airport to Singapore Changi Airport, on my recent journey in May 2025. I'm going to be reviewing the lounges that you have access to beforehand at Heathrow Airport, the food, the drink, the amenity kits you get on board, the facilities, and of course, the overall flight experience, including anything that you might want to know. Our flight today from London Heathrow Airport to Singapore Changi Airport clocks in at just under 11,000 kilometers and takes 13.5 hours. My journey today begins not at Heathrow Airport, but at Gatwick Airport, where I had arrived that morning on an overnight flight from America. Now, if you're not familiar with these two airports, despite the fact they're both called London Airport, so London Gatwick or London Heathrow, they are not close to each other. They're actually about 40 kilometers apart. Another thing you should be aware of is that there is no train connecting the two airports, so you have to go by car or by bus. This can take as little as 40 minutes if there's no traffic whatsoever and your driver really puts the foot down, or it can take as long as 3 hours during rush hour periods. Do keep this in mind if you ever need to make this connection. It's not going to be a 20-minute train transfer like in other countries. After about a 1-hour journey by car, I arrived at Heathrow Airport Terminal 5, which is where most British Airways flights fly from in Heathrow. The airport was actually fairly quiet when I arrived today, and there wouldn't have been a long wait at any check-in. But, as I had access, I made my way over to the left side of the terminal where the Club World check-in is located. It's also located right next to the fast-track security, which you will have access to if you're flying in this cabin. Security took about 10 minutes, and I made my way over to the British Airways Galleries Club Lounge North. I've posted a full review of this lounge on my channel, and the video of which is linked at the end of this video. But in summary, this is quite a pleasant lounge. It's got a nice terrace that you can see here, an okay selection of food, and an extensive selection of drink. They also have shower rooms available if you want to freshen up before or after your flight. That said, every time I've been here, it's been incredibly crowded, and you will sometimes struggle to get a seat. With this in mind, I made my way over to the alternative British Airways lounge, which is located at the B gates. The transfer time is only about 10 minutes and involves a short train ride. I've also reviewed this lounge in full in a separate video, which is also linked at the end of this one, but in short, this is a much nicer lounge. You get pretty much everything that you get at the main Galleries North lounge, apart from the terrace, but it's so much quieter and peaceful. I'd highly recommend going here instead of one of the main lounges. Having enjoyed my time in the lounge, it was time to make my way to the gate to board my flight. Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, please subscribe. My flight today was departing from the C gates, which meant I had to pop on the same train I used to get to the B gates. This is incredibly efficient, and I was there in about 5 minutes. The walk from the train to my gate took only about 2 minutes. Quite short. My flight today was departing from gate C65, which is technically one of the furthest gates in the airport. As we weren't boarding yet, I took this opportunity to snap some footage of the Airbus A380 that was going to fly us to Singapore. As you can see, they've extended 3 jet bridges to this, as it's a double-decker plane. One for first, one for everything else on the lower deck, and one for the entirety of the upper deck. I swear, every time I look at this plane, I am amazed at how it's able to get into the sky. I mean, I understand the aerodynamics of it, but to think this thing is going to be hurtling through the air 35,000 foot high at 600 miles an hour, it blows my mind. I try not to think about it too much. I had to wait about 15 minutes to board, but eventually we were called and I made my way down the jet bridge towards the plane. And here we are. This is going to be my home for the next 13.5 hours. I selected a window seat, which you should note is in the reverse position, as in, you're going to be taking off and flying backwards. The cabin layout is in a 2-4-2 configuration, which, as you can see here, means they pack a lot of seats into the cabin. I'm not a fan of this, and I'll talk about it more later. Very promptly, one of the air hostesses came by and offered a pre-departure drink. I went for orange juice, although champagne and water were also available. As you can see here, this is a very long seat, so you actually get 3 separate windows to look out of. Something I didn't realise when I booked this seat, however, is that my window overlooks the wing, which will somewhat hamper the views I'm going to get on this flight. Not the end of the world, but I do tend to like looking out of a window when I can. The seat is controlled by these manual buttons to the left, which are intuitive and easy to understand. On the bottom left-hand side of the seat is a personal storage compartment, into which they put the amenity kit, a bottle of water, and you had enough room to store some basic belongings. Although note, not your shoes. It's too small for that, and they have to go in the overhead cabin. One design feature which I must say I don't like about this seat is that the in-flight entertainment screen folds out from the side. This has to be put away for takeoff and landing, which means you're not able to watch anything for about the first 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes of your flight. One thing I am pleased about, however, is that post-COVID, they have returned to paper menus. British Airways operates an open bar on its long-haul flights, and there were numerous cocktails, mocktails, spirits, and soft drinks to choose from. In addition, there were wines available, including both an English and a French-style champagne, white wines, red wines, and fortified wines like port. They also had a rosé wine available if that's your thing. For food, they do 2 meal services on this flight, a dinner shortly after takeoff and a breakfast shortly before landing. I had both of these and will be reviewing them later in the video. The in-flight entertainment is controlled by this manual remote. I must say, it is looking a little bit dated, although it was responsive, which is what I value most for a remote control. The headphones are British Airways' own brand headphones and are noise cancelling and padded. I must say, they were some of the more comfortable headphones I wear on aeroplanes. The amenity kit is by a British company called The White Company. I don't really care about this stuff, but it's nice to see British Airways supporting a local brand. Within the amenity kit was everything you would expect to see: eye shades, earplugs, toothbrush, toothpaste, a lip balm, an eyeliner, and also a spray to spray on your pillow with a lavender scent, which is meant to help you sleep. I can't comment on whether this works or not, as I suspect the sleeping pill I took was doing all the heavy lifting for me getting a good night's sleep. About half hour after I boarded, we began our pushback from the gate, and British Airways played their in-flight safety video, which I personally like. I'll let you listen.
Do I smell the winds of war? I see smoke on the horizon.
Smoking, including e-cigarettes, vaping, and the use of other smoking devices, is not permitted at any time whilst on board, including the toilets, which have smoke detectors in them.
Gerald, did
I think that in-flight video strikes the perfect balance of being quintessentially British whilst also being quirky and interesting at the same time. And by quirky, I mean in a good way. Our taxi to the runway took 23 minutes, which is quite a long time for Heathrow. I think there was a little bit of traffic congestion. I'll speed this bit up so as not to bore you. Not my best video for takeoff, I know, but my view was hampered by the wing. And just like that, we were airborne and on our way to Singapore. Now, this is where we encountered one of the first main problems on the flight. The in-flight entertainment system was not working. You would push play and nothing would happen. I alerted this to the crew, who said they would reset my system. However, this did not work, and it turns out I was not the only one experiencing this problem. The situation got so bad that the captain actually had to come on the in-flight speaker to make an announcement. This is not ideal when you're looking at 13 hours ahead of you. I really hope this would work. However, after about an hour, they still hadn't fixed it, and we were all getting this message saying that the service was unavailable. Finally, after about 2 hours on board, they managed to fix it by doing a complete reset of the internal electronics. You couldn't even operate the seat during this time, but it worked. The flight took off at about 7 p.m, so it took about 2 hours for the sun to start to set. I thought I would check out the toilets to see what they looked like. If I could use one word to describe these toilets, I would say adequate. Nothing wrong with them, they were a decent size, and the in-flight amenities were of a high quality. You got a mist if you wanted to freshen up the room, and the amenities were provided by the White Company, the same company that makes the amenity kit. As you can see here, the sink area was also very clean, although you would expect that at the beginning of a flight. There was nothing in here, however, to suggest that this was a premium cabin toilet. It looked very plain and very standard. By way of a comparison, here are the business class toilets on a Singapore Airlines flight. As you can see, they have nice touches like the flowers, and the overall finish is to a much higher standard. This one here certainly feels a lot more premium. Back to BA. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not a hypercritical or fussy person, but this is an airline review channel, and I need to point this stuff out if people are going to spend thousands of pounds on a ticket. When I returned to my seat, the crew had brought round the pre-flight drink. I went for a Diet Coke, and it was served with a salted rosemary snack mix. It was at this point I noticed the second thing wrong with this seat. I'm not sure if you can make it out because of the low lighting, but there was a USB-A style charger, but it didn't work. The charger wouldn't stick. This meant that I wasn't able to easily charge my devices during the flight and needed to rely on my power bank. As the flight was making its way over Austria and Italy, the crew began the first meal service. For the starter, I went for the prawn and smoked salmon. I must say, I wasn't terribly impressed by this, and please forgive the quality of the video. I hadn't learned yet to put on the low light mode on my camera. I fixed it later in the video. It was served with some bread and a small side salad. There was nothing wrong with it, it was tiny, and I've had smoked salmon appetizers with BA before that were far more substantial and well presented. For the main course, I went for the cod. I mentioned in some of my previous videos that British Airways has gone to a real effort recently to improve the quality of their catering, and it does show. This is far better than you would have gotten a few years ago. For dessert, I went for the chocolate, orange and walnut cake. This was good. It's fairly hard to mess up a chocolate cake, and they certainly didn't do that. It was moist, tasty, and the sauce it was served with complemented it very well. No complaints here. One thing I can complain about is that the crew didn't clear away either the starter or the main course dishes at any point during this flight, and my drinks went empty unless I proactively asked for more. This meant that my tray table got incredibly cluttered at times, and I had to push the call service button to get drinks. And now for the third thing wrong with this seat. You're meant to have a little light to illuminate your seat. I was planning on using this to film my videos of the food. However, as you can see here, it was broken and didn't work, so I couldn't read when all the lights were off. Having finished my meal and took my sleeping pill, it was time for me to head off to sleep. Good night, everyone. I will see you in a few hours. I got a solid 5 hours sleep and woke up to request a cup of coffee. I was pleased to see that this was proactively served with a small chocolate Lindt ball, which was a nice touch. I also requested some water as I was feeling dehydrated. I requested a further 2 cups of coffee to wake me up that was served in the same way. I flipped out my in-flight entertainment screen to see that we had just flown over India and had about 3¼ hours remaining on our flight. I relaxed for another 2 hours before the crew came round to do the breakfast service. The starter was various cut fruits, a croissant, and a strawberry muesli bowl. I've got to say, I'm impressed by the service of this fruit. They've done it out in a really nice way. It's only fruit, but the presentation was spot on. The croissant tasted fresh, and the strawberry muesli tasted tasty. One more coffee. I really do need it first thing in the morning. For the main course, I went for the full English breakfast, because when in Rome. This consisted of one rasher of bacon, one sausage, and some very nicely cooked eggs, as well as the standard tomato and mushrooms. Having eaten nothing but American bacon for the past 3 weeks, I was absolutely delighted to finally have some British bacon. With our meal service over, I checked the screen again and saw that we were about 45 minutes away from Singapore, flying over Malaysia on our way there. The captain came on the speaker and announced we would be beginning our descent soon, and so to please prepare the cabin for landing. As I mentioned earlier, this involves putting away your in-flight entertainment screen, so I only had this very nice view of the wing to look at, not the end of the world. I didn't bother to film the landing, as it was only a view of a wing, but the landing was smooth, and we taxied to the gate, which took about 5 minutes. Deplaning took about 10 minutes, and there I was, finally back to Singapore Changi Airport. It was a reasonably short walk to immigration, which, in typical Changi style, only took about a minute. I'm always impressed when I arrive into Changi. They managed to incorporate such a nice design and so much greenery into the entire airport. Please take note, Gatwick and Heathrow. This is what a first impression to a country can look like. In no time at all, I was in my taxi and on my way to Marina Bay. In conclusion, I'm going to rate this flight a BA7, by which I mean to say, if it was any other international carrier, other than the American ones, like a Middle Eastern carrier or an Asian carrier, it would probably be a 5. But by BA standards, it wasn't half bad. The service was good, the flight was smooth, and there were no real delays. The lounges beforehand, whilst not world-leading, were perfectly adequate. The major problem with this flight was the hard product. The in-flight entertainment didn't work for the first 2 hours, my seat light was broken, and the in-flight charger was also broken. On top of that, the cabin is way too cramped. 242 in long-haul business class is way too many seats per row. 121, which is the industry standard for long-haul business, as is shown here on Singapore Airlines, gives you much more room per seat and leads to a much less crowded feel in the cabin. Compare the seats you just saw to the British Airways seat here. As you can see, they're much narrower with much less room to move around. If British Airways priced their seats accordingly, you wouldn't mind so much, but they charge pretty much exactly the same, if not somewhat higher, than the Middle Eastern and Asian carriers that do this route, that operate on a 121 layout. To their credit, they've also switched to 121 on their latest Club Suite product, but that's only available on a very limited number of aircrafts and a limited number of routes. Of my past 5 British Airways flights, only 1 has featured the new cabin. As I've said before, the British Airways Club World seat is better than every single economy seat on any airline, but it's not an industry-leading product, and if there are other options, I would advise you to take them.